The lights of the Galactic Council station sparkled against the dark canvas of space. Ships from 100 different worlds docked at its massive ports, bringing diplomats and leaders to witness history. Today marked the first time humanity would formally present itself to the greater galactic community. After 50 years of faster-than-light travel, Earth had finally earned its invitation to the table where ancient civilizations decided the fate of star systems. Ambassador Day Wan stood in the preparation chamber, adjusting his formal suit one last time. He carried a sleek black case containing humanity's gift to the Council. Inside were carefully selected pieces of human culture, digitized libraries of literature, recordings of music from every continent, holographic displays of art spanning thousands of years. His team had spent months choosing items that would show Earth's depth and sophistication. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. Day Wan walked through the curved corridors of the station, passing aliens of shapes and sizes that still amazed him even after years of contact. Some walked on two legs like humans, others floated in spheres of liquid or skittered on multiple limbs. They all stopped to watch him pass, their various eyes following the human with curiosity. The council chamber itself took his breath away. It was a massive circular room with a transparent dome showing the stars above. Seats rose in tiers around a central platform where speakers would stand. Representatives from dozens of species filled those seats, their translators humming softly as they spoke in their native languages. At the highest tier sat the most powerful delegations, and among them, the Veltari Empire commanded the largest section. The Veltari were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly under the chamber lights. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 5,000 years. Their technology was legendary. Their military had never lost a war. When they spoke, younger species listened and obeyed. The galaxy had an unspoken hierarchy, and the Veltari stood firmly at its peak. Day Wan noticed Princess Yuna immediately. She sat beside the Veltari delegation, impossible to miss in her elaborate royal garments. She looked young, barely into adulthood by human standards, with an air of boredom that suggested she found this entire proceeding beneath her interest. Her advisor, an older Veltari named Tae Yang, sat stiffly beside her, occasionally leaning over to whisper instructions. The council director, an elderly being from the Manthi species, raised his multiple arms for silence. His voice echoed through the translation system. "We now welcome Earth's representative, Ambassador Day Wan, to present his world's petition for recognition." Day Wan stepped onto the central platform. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. He felt the weight of Earth behind him, of billions of humans watching this broadcast, hoping their planet would finally be accepted as equals among the stars. He spoke clearly and calmly. "Honored council members, I come before you today not to beg for approval, but to share what humanity offers to this great community. We are young, yes. Our time among the stars spans only decades compared to your centuries and millennia. But youth does not mean insignificance." He opened his case and activated the holographic display. Images of Earth appeared above the platform. Great cities gleaming in sunlight, vast oceans teeming with life, mountains, forests, and deserts in stunning variety. Then came the art. Paintings that captured human emotion in color and form. Sculptures that showed the beauty of the human figure. Architecture that reached toward the sky in defiance of gravity. "We bring music," Day One continued, and the chamber filled with a symphony. Human voices and instruments creating harmonies that made several alien species lean forward with interest. "We bring literature, philosophy, and scientific innovation. We bring our perspective unique in this galaxy, shaped by our struggle to survive on a single world before reaching for the stars." He saw some delegates nodding. The Kelvari representative seemed particularly interested, her crystalline face reflecting the holographic images with appreciation. Even some of the Veltari delegation appeared to be paying attention. But Princess Yuna was laughing. It started as a soft giggle, quickly covered by her hand. But then it grew louder. She made no effort to hide it anymore, her laughter echoing through the suddenly quiet chamber. Other delegates turned to look at her in surprise. Tae Yang touched her arm in warning, but she waved him away. "I am sorry," Yuna said, though her tone suggested she was not sorry at all. "But this is too adorable. Look at them, so proud of their little pictures and songs." She stood up, addressing the chamber with the confidence of someone who had never been contradicted in her life. These humans are like children showing their parents a drawing and expecting praise. Yes, yes, very nice. You learn to make sounds and colors. How precious. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Insulting another species during a formal presentation violated every rule of diplomatic conduct. Daewon stood frozen on the platform, his holographic display still showing images of human achievement. Yuna was not finished. She walked down from her tier, moving closer to the platform, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. Let me be clear, since apparently no one else will speak the truth. Humanity achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago.
50 years!
My people had mapped half the galaxy before your species even invented the wheel. You come here with your primitive offerings and expect us to what? Be impressed? Accept you as equals? She picked up one of the physical items from Daewon's case, a small sculpture of a human figure reaching upward. She examined it with exaggerated interest, turning it over in her hands. This is very nice, truly. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when you have actually learned to walk among the stars properly, when you have something meaningful to contribute beyond tourist trinkets, you can return to this council. Until then, maybe focus on not destroying your single little planet with your constant wars and pollution. The other delegates sat in stunned silence. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked angry at the breach of protocol. A few of the younger species representatives looked down at their seats, as if remembering times when they too had been dismissed by the powerful Veltari. Everyone expected Daewon to respond, to argue, to defend humanity's honor, to demand an apology, or perhaps to accept the humiliation with grace and beg for another chance. The galaxy ran on hierarchies and protocols. When a powerful species spoke, lesser species either argued back or submitted. Those were the only two options ever seen in the council chamber. Daewon did neither. He reached over calmly and deactivated his holographic display. The images of Earth vanished, leaving the platform empty except for him and his case. With careful, deliberate movements, he gathered his materials and closed the case. His face showed no anger, no shame, no emotion whatsoever. He looked like a man who had simply finished his business. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. Ambassador? The council director called out uncertainly. Do you wish to respond to Princess Yuna's comments? Daewon did not stop walking. He did not look back. He did not acknowledge the question. Wait, Yuna called out, sounding surprised now rather than mocking. Are you seriously just leaving? Do you have nothing to say? Are you running home to your little backwater world because someone told you the truth? Still, Daewon said nothing. His footsteps echoed on the chamber floor as he walked steadily toward the large doors. The guards, uncertain what to do, opened them for him. He passed through without a word, without a glance backward, and disappeared into the corridor beyond. The doors closed behind him with a soft boom that seemed impossibly loud in the silent chamber. Princess Yuna stood alone on the floor, looking at the empty platform where the human had been. For the first time in her life, someone had not cared what she thought. Someone had not argued, not submitted, not even acknowledged her existence. The human had simply decided she was not worth his time and left. The feeling this gave her was entirely new and deeply uncomfortable. Taeyang descended quickly from the Veltari section, his face showing rare displeasure. Your Highness, he said quietly, we should return to our ship immediately. Around the chamber, delegates began whispering to each other in dozens of languages. The Kelvari representative was smiling. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked at the Veltari delegation with expressions that might have been satisfaction at seeing their arrogance finally answered, even if only with silence. In that moment, without saying a single word, Daewon had changed something fundamental in the galactic order. He had shown that humanity would rather walk away than accept disrespect. And across the galaxy, other species watched the broadcast and wondered if they too could find such courage. The Veltari royal ship departed from the council station 6 hours after the incident. Inside the private quarters reserved for Princess Yuna, an uncomfortable meeting was taking place. High Chancellor Taeyang stood with his arms crossed, his usually calm expression replaced by something approaching anger. Do you understand what you have done? He asked. Yuna sat on an elegant chair, still wearing her formal robes. She had expected this lecture and prepared herself to endure it. I spoke the truth. Someone needed to say it. These humans were being given false hope. You humiliated a diplomatic envoy during a formal presentation. Taeyang began pacing, something he only did when deeply troubled. You violated protocols that have governed council interactions for thousands of years. But worse than that, Princess, you pushed too far and the human simply walked away. So what? Yuna's voice carried defiance, but underneath was a hint of uncertainty. He had no response to my points. He ran away. He did not run, he walked. There is a profound difference. Taeyang stopped pacing and looked directly at her. In our culture, being ignored is the deepest insult. To speak and have your words treated as meaningless, to be deemed unworthy of even a response, that is true humiliation. Today, in front of the entire council, a human decided you were not important enough to argue with. The words landed like physical blows. Yuna opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. She had been laughed at, argued with, even hated before, but she had never been ignored. Everyone always cared what she thought, what she said, what she wanted. The human silence had somehow been louder than any shouted response. The other delegations are talking, Taeyang continued. Not about the human's supposed weakness, but about his dignity. He came with offerings and was mocked, yet he maintained perfect composure. He did not beg, did not argue, did not lose his temper. He simply decided the council was not worthy of what he had to share. That is ridiculous, Yuna said, but her voice lacked conviction. He should have defended himself, defended his species. Instead, he just gave up. He did not give up. He chose self-respect over opportunity. Do you know how rare that is? Most species would endure any humiliation for a chance at council recognition. Humans apparently will not. Taeyang moved toward the door. Your father has been informed. He is not pleased. After Taeyang left, Yuna sat alone in her quarters. The ship hummed around her, carrying her back toward the Veltari homeworld. She activated her personal computer and began searching for information about Earth and humans. What she found surprised her. Humanity's history was violent but fascinating. They had fought countless wars among themselves, nearly destroying their planet multiple times. Yet they had also created breathtaking art, music that stirred emotions she did not know she could feel, and literature that explored profound questions about existence. They had gone from basic tools to space travel in a fraction of the time it took most species. There were recordings of human speeches, leaders talking about freedom and dignity and the right to self-determination. There were images of humans standing up to powerful oppressors, refusing to bow even when facing certain death. Their entire culture seemed built around the idea that some things mattered more than survival, that respect could not be taken, only given freely. She found herself watching a recording of Ambassador Daewon from earlier council sessions. He spoke eloquently, answering questions with intelligence and humor. He laughed easily and seemed genuinely interested in learning about other species. This was not some primitive being stumbling through the galaxy. This was a sophisticated representative of a young but vibrant civilization, and she had called him adorable, had compared humans to children, had dismissed everything his people offered. The realization sat uncomfortably in her chest. For the first time, Yuna wondered if perhaps she had been wrong. On Earth, in the human diplomatic headquarters in Geneva, a different kind of storm was brewing. Ambassador Daewon stood before a panel of Earth's senior officials, broadcast to government leaders around the world. Some looked angry, others looked worried. All wanted answers. You walked out, the Secretary General said, stating the obvious. Without permission, without consulting Earth Command, you simply abandoned the presentation. Yes, Daewon replied simply. Do you understand the opportunity you may have cost us? The resources spent preparing for that moment? The hopes of billions? I understand completely. Daewon stood straight, showing no apology in his posture. I also understand that staying would have cost us something far more valuable than council membership. And what is that? The military commander asked sharply. Our self-respect. Daewon looked at each person on the panel in turn. If we accept being treated as primitive children, as amusing pets performing tricks for the approval of ancient empires, then that is what we become. Not in their eyes, but in our own. I will not represent a humanity that begs for recognition from those who mock us. The panel members exchanged glances. Several looked like they wanted to argue. But Earth's defense minister, a woman named Bo-Ra with a military background, spoke up. The ambassador is right. We don't beg. We either earn respect or we go our own way. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, Earth's government made their decision. They would not recall Daewon or apologize for his actions. They would not request another chance to present to the council. Instead, they would focus on building relationships with other species. Outside the traditional power structures, the decision sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Within days, the Kelvari Consortium sent a formal request for trade negotiations with Earth. The Kelvari were a mid-level power, respected for their artistic achievements and philosophical traditions. Their message was simple. They had been impressed by humanity's dignity and wished to establish cultural exchanges. Other species followed. The Rathani, the Pelvic, even the isolated Quor sent diplomatic feelers. These were not the great empires that dominated the council, but they represented billions of beings and controlled significant resources. More importantly, they were species that had endured centuries of Veltari condescension and saw in humanity a kindred spirit. A galactic news network, operated by a journalist named Jiwan from a species called the Vextari, ran a special report titled The Species That Said No to Empire. The broadcast spread across hundreds of worlds. In it, Jiwan interviewed representatives from various younger species about their experiences with the council's power dynamics. "We are all expected to be grateful," one delegate said. "Grateful that the ancient empires allow us to exist in their shadow. Grateful for their attention, their technology, their supposed wisdom. The humans were the first species I have ever seen who simply refused to play that game." Another delegate added, "Walking away takes more courage than fighting. Fighting means you still care about winning. Walking away means you have decided the game itself is not worth playing." The broadcast ended with footage of Daewon's exit from the council chamber. His calm face and steady steps now symbolic of something larger. The image spread across social networks on 1,000 worlds. Young beings from dozens of species began using it as a symbol of resistance against enforced hierarchies. On the Veltari homeworld, in the imperial palace that floated above the capital city, Emperor Donghyun watched these developments with growing concern. His advisors brought him reports of shifting alliances, of species that had always obeyed Veltari guidance now openly questioning their authority. "It is one incident," the emperor said, though he sounded less certain than his words suggested. "One human walked away from one meeting. This will blow over." But his senior advisor, an ancient Veltari named Quan, shook his head. "Majesty, it is not about one human. It is about what that human represents. For thousands of years we have maintained order through the understanding that we are superior, and everyone else knows it. Now a species has challenged that understanding, not through war or argument but through simple refusal to accept it. They have shown other species that our approval is not necessary for them to have value." The emperor drummed his fingers on his throne. "What does my daughter say about this?" Princess Yuna has locked herself in her quarters. She refuses to see anyone and has been researching human culture obsessively. In her private rooms, Yuna stared at another recording of human history. This one showed a small group of humans facing an overwhelming military force. They had been asked to surrender, to accept subjugation to a more powerful army. Instead, they had fought. They had lost, but their resistance had inspired others until eventually the powerful army was defeated. The humans had a saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." They meant it literally. They would rather die than accept a life without dignity and self-determination. Yuna thought about Ambassador Daewon walking away from the council chamber. He had walked away from power, from opportunity, from everything most species dreamed of achieving. But he had kept something the Veltari had tried to take from him, his pride, and she had been the one trying to take it. The realization made her feel sick. She was a princess of the greatest empire in the galaxy. She had been raised to believe in her own superiority, in the natural order that placed Veltari above all others. 3 months had passed since the incident at the council chamber. Princess Yuna stood before her father, Emperor Donghyun, in the private throne room of the imperial palace. She wore simple traveling clothes instead of her royal garments, and her determination showed clearly on her face. "Absolutely not," the emperor said for the 3rd time. "A princess of Veltar does not go wandering among primitive worlds like some common tourist. I am not going as a tourist, father. I am going to learn." Yuna kept her voice respectful but firm. "I have spent 3 months studying human culture from recordings and texts. I need to see it firsthand to understand what I missed." "You missed nothing. They are a young species with potential, Yes, but not worthy of this obsession. The Emperor gestured at the datapads scattered around his throne, all containing reports about shifting galactic politics. We have more important concerns. 3 more species have refused our trade agreements this month, citing a need to explore their own path, whatever that means. That is exactly why I need to go. Yuna stepped closer. We are losing influence because we do not understand these younger species anymore. We treat them as children, and they are walking away from us just like the human did. Let me go to Earth, learn about them, and perhaps find a way to repair what I damaged. Tai Yang, standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. Majesty, the princess makes a valid point. We need intelligence on human culture and thinking. Who better to gather it than someone they would never suspect? The Emperor looked between his daughter and his advisor. Finally, he sighed. You may go, but with conditions. You will travel in disguise. You will be accompanied by security, and you will report back regularly. I agree to everything except security following me. Yuna raised a hand to stop her father's protest. If I arrive with guards, I will never see real human culture. They will treat me differently. I need to be ordinary. After another hour of negotiation, the Emperor reluctantly agreed. Princess Yuna would travel to Earth alone, disguised as a student participating in a cultural exchange program. She would have emergency communication devices, but no visible security presence. It was the most freedom she had ever been granted, and the most terrifying prospect she had ever faced. 2 weeks later, Yuna arrived in Seoul, the capital of the Korean administrative zone on Earth. The city sprawled beneath her shuttle, a massive complex of towers and parks, traditional buildings preserved among modern structures, and millions of humans going about their daily lives. It looked both alien and strangely familiar, like the cities of her own world, but with a different energy, a different rhythm. She was assigned a guide through the cultural exchange program, a graduate student named Haewon who specialized in interspecies relations. Haewon met her at the shuttle port with a friendly smile and a stack of information packets. Welcome to Earth, Haewon said cheerfully. I am so excited to show you around. We do not get many Veltari visitors anymore, especially after, well, she trailed off awkwardly. After one of us insulted your ambassador at the council, Yuna finished. Yes, I know about that. It was shameful behavior. Haewon looked surprised but pleased. Well, it is good that you think so. Come on, let me show you where you will be staying. The dormitory was nothing like Yuna's palace rooms. It was small, with basic furniture and shared bathroom facilities, but it was hers, and for the first time in her life, no servants waited outside her door. No one would bring her meals or arrange her schedule. She was just another student in a building full of beings from various worlds. That first night, Yuna lay in her narrow bed and felt something unexpected. Happiness. The anonymity was liberating. When she walked through the halls, people nodded politely but did not bow. They did not know she was a princess, did not care about her bloodline or her empire's power. They saw only another student trying to understand their world. Haewon proved to be an excellent guide. She showed Yuna the markets where humans bartered and traded with alien merchants. She took her to museums filled with human history, the beautiful achievements and terrible mistakes displayed side by side. She brought her to concerts where human musicians created sounds that made Yuna's chest ache with unexpected emotion. But most importantly, Haewon introduced her to ordinary humans, students who worked long hours to afford their education, artists who created beauty even though they would never be famous, scientists who pursued knowledge for its own sake. These were not the carefully selected examples Yuna had seen in official presentations. These were real people, flawed and struggling and absolutely determined to make something of their brief lives. Yuna began to understand something the recordings could never teach her. Humans lived with an urgency that longer-lived species had forgotten. They knew their time was limited, that their individual lives were tiny sparks in the vastness of space. Rather than making them humble, this knowledge made them fierce. Every moment mattered. Every achievement was precious because it had to be earned in such a short span of time. One evening, Haewon invited Yuna to a public lecture at the university. The speaker was listed simply as Ambassador Daewon, discussing the future of human-alien relations. Yuna's heart began racing the moment she saw the name. She had come to Earth hoping to eventually meet him, but she had not expected it to happen so soon. The lecture hall was packed with students and faculty. Daewon walked onto the stage wearing casual clothes, looking nothing like the formal ambassador she had seen at the council. He smiled at the audience and began speaking without notes, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Today I want to talk about respect," he said. "Not the kind of respect that comes from fear or power, but the kind that exists between equals. Many alien species expect humanity to be grateful for their attention, to feel honored that they notice us at all. But respect that must be begged for is not respect. It is pity disguised as acceptance." Yuna sat in the back of the hall listening with complete attention. Daewon described the council meeting, though he did not mention her by name. He talked about the choice he had made to walk away and why. Staying would have meant accepting their premise that we were inferior, that we should be thankful for scraps of recognition. Walking away meant declaring that we have value, regardless of whether they see it. We would rather be alone with our dignity than accepted without it. The audience applauded. Students asked questions, and Daewon answered each one thoughtfully. He talked about the new alliances Earth was forming, the species who approached them as equals rather than superiors. He spoke with hope about a future where the galaxy was not organized by age or power, but by mutual respect. When the lecture ended, Yuna tried to approach him. Her hands were shaking. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, planning what she would say, how she would explain herself. But when she got close, Daewon was surrounded by students asking final questions. She waited patiently. Finally, the crowd thinned and she stood before him. Up close, she could see that he was older than she had thought, with lines around his eyes that suggested both wisdom and weariness. He looked at her with polite interest, clearly not recognizing her. "Ambassador Daewon," she said, her voice barely steady, "I wanted to tell you that your lecture was very moving, and I wanted to apologize." "Apologize?" He looked confused. "Have we met?" "Yes, at the council chamber." Yuna pulled back the hood of her jacket slightly, revealing her distinctive Veltari features more clearly. "I am Princess Yuna. I was the one who insulted you." The recognition dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by a hardening of his expression. The warmth he had shown the students vanished. He looked at her for a long moment, then began gathering his materials. "I appreciate you coming all this way," he said in a flat tone, "but I have nothing to discuss with someone who does not value what we offer." "Excuse me." He walked past her toward the exit. Yuna stood frozen, the rejection hitting her like a physical blow. She had traveled across the galaxy, had humbled herself to apologize, and he had dismissed her in seconds, just like she had dismissed him. The irony was not lost on her. Haewon found her standing alone in the empty lecture hall 10 minutes later, tears running down her face. "Yuna, what happened? I saw you talking to the ambassador and then he left and you looked like someone died." "He walked away from me," Yuna said, her voice breaking, "just like I made him walk away at the council. I tried to apologize and he just left." Haewon guided her to a seat. "Tell me what happened." "All of it," so Yuna did. She confessed her real identity, explained the insult at the council, described her guilt and her journey to Earth seeking understanding. Haewon listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to sympathy to something like understanding. "Do you know why Daewon walked away at the council?" Haewon asked when Yuna finished. "Because he was angry? Hurt? Offended?" "No." Haewon shook her head. "He walked away because staying would have meant accepting your view of us. You had already decided we were inferior, that our offerings were meaningless. If he had stayed and argued, he would have been fighting to convince you we had value, but we should not have to convince anyone of that. Our value exists whether you see it or not. But I came here to apologize, to make things right," Yuna protested. The emergency alert came during breakfast. Yuna was sitting in a small cafe near the university with Haewon, discussing human philosophy over coffee and pastries, when every screen in the establishment suddenly switched to a news broadcast. The anchor's face showed barely controlled panic. "Reports are coming in from the outer colonies of an attack by an unknown hostile force. Initial estimates suggest complete destruction of the research station on Helio 7. All 300 inhabitants are presumed dead. The attackers appear to be a biological swarm of some kind, moving through space in massive numbers." Yuna's blood ran cold. She activated her secure communicator under the table, accessing Veltari military channels. What she saw made her stomach turn. Dozens of colonies under attack, ships disappearing, entire populations going silent. And at the center of it all, sensor readings of something the galaxy had never seen before. The Rathnir swarm had arrived. Within hours, more information emerged. The swarm was a hive mind species that consumed everything in its path, biological matter and technology alike. They traveled in clouds of millions, maybe billions of individual creatures that acted as one terrifying intelligence. They did not negotiate, did not communicate, did not show mercy. They simply consumed. The Veltari Empire mobilized its fleets. Their ships were technological marvels equipped with weapons that could destroy planets. But against an enemy that moved in such overwhelming numbers, that could rebuild losses almost instantly by consuming fallen enemies, even Veltari technology struggled. For the first time in thousands of years, the Empire faced an opponent they could not easily defeat. Yuna watched the news with growing horror. Haywan sat beside her, equally shocked. "This is bad," Haywan said quietly. "If the swarm is not stopped at the Veltari borders, they will spread through the entire sector. My people will stop them," Yuna said, but her voice lacked confidence. She had accessed classified military reports. The Veltari were winning battles but losing the war. For every swarm creature they destroyed, 10 more appeared. Their strategy of technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that simply did not care about losses. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. This time, the meeting was broadcast openly across all networks. Yuna and Haywan watched from the cafe as Emperor Donghyun himself addressed the council. His image projected large above the chamber floor. "The Rathnir swarm threatens not just the Veltari Empire, but all civilized space," the Emperor declared. "We call upon the Council to mobilize a coalition fleet immediately. Every species must contribute ships and resources to stop this threat before it spreads beyond containment." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then the Kelvari representative stood. "The Veltari Empire has led the Council for millennia. You have made decisions for all of us, demanded tribute and obedience, insisted on your superiority in all things. Now you face a true threat, and suddenly we are all equals who must unite for the common good." Other representatives began speaking, their voices overlapping. Years of resentment poured out. The Pelvic complained about unfair trade agreements. The Rathani mentioned military interventions that favored Veltari interests. Smaller species listed grievances going back centuries. They were not refusing to help, but they were not rushing to answer the Emperor's call either. Then the human representative stood. It was Bora, the defense minister Yuna had seen in the recordings. She was a small woman with steel in her eyes and scars on her face that spoke of past battles. "Earth will defend our colonies and our allies," Bora said clearly, "but we will not contribute to a coalition fleet under Veltari command. If the Veltari Empire wishes our help, they must ask for it properly. As equals." The Emperor's face showed barely contained anger. "This is not the time for political games. Billions of lives are at stake. Then perhaps the Empire should learn to ask rather than demand," Bora replied calmly. "Humanity knows about fighting for survival. We have done it our entire existence. But we fight on our terms, alongside those who respect us, not under the command of those who view us as inferior." The broadcast ended with no resolution. The council was deadlocked. The Veltari expected automatic obedience and were not receiving it. Other species were willing to help but demanded respect in return. And all the while the swarm continued its advance, consuming worlds and moving closer to populated space. In the cafe, Yuna sat with her head in her hands. Haywan touched her shoulder gently. "Your empire is in trouble." "I know," Yuna whispered. "And it is partially my fault. I represented everything wrong with how we treat other species. I thought we were superior, that everyone else should be grateful for our attention. Now when we need allies, they remember how we treated them." She stood up abruptly. "I have to go back. I have to talk to my father. Will he listen?" Haywan asked. "I do not know, but I have to try." The journey back to the Veltari homeworld took 2 days. During that time, Yuna watched the war reports with growing despair. The swarm had adapted to Veltari weapons, evolving defenses at an impossible speed. More colonies fell. Refugee ships fled toward the interior worlds, carrying stories of entire populations consumed in minutes. She arrived at the palace to find it in chaos. Military advisors rushed through the halls. Her father sat in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions and casualty reports. He looked older than she remembered. the weight of the crisis aging him visibly. "Yuna," he said when he saw her, "you should not be here. It is not safe. Nowhere is safe if we do not stop the swarm." She moved to stand beside him, looking at the displays. "Father, you need to ask for help. Really ask, not demand." "I have asked. I addressed the entire council." "You told them what to do. That is not the same as asking." Yuna took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something about my time on Earth. I learned that respect cannot be commanded. It must be earned. The humans have a concept they call earned dignity. It means that your worth comes from your actions, not your bloodline or your power. We have been trying to command respect through fear and superiority. It does not work anymore." The Emperor shook his head tiredly. "Philosophy will not save us from the swarm. No, but allies will. Real allies who fight beside us because they choose to, not because they fear us." Yuna pulled up footage from Earth's news networks. "Look at this. Humans are mobilizing their fleets to protect their own colonies. They have analyzed the swarm's patterns and developed new tactics. They are winning small engagements using strategies we never considered. But they will not share those tactics with us, because we never respected what they could offer." She pulled up more footage, showing human ships engaging the swarm. The tactics were brutal and unconventional. Human vessels would ram into swarm clusters, destroying themselves but taking thousands of creatures with them. They used proximity mines and coordinated fighter strikes that exploited gaps in the swarm's hive coordination. They lost many ships, but they were learning how to hurt an enemy that seemed invincible. "They fight like they have nothing to lose," one of the military advisors said, watching the footage with fascination and horror. "They fight like every battle matters," Yuna corrected, "because to them it does. They do not have thousands of years of history to fall back on. They have only now, only this moment, so they use it fully." Emperor Donghyun watched the human tactics in silence. Finally, he spoke. "What do you suggest? Send me to Earth as an official envoy. Let me apologize properly, not just for my insult, but for centuries of our empire, treating them and others as lesser beings. Let me ask for their help as an equal asking an equal. It might not work, but it is the only chance we have." The Emperor looked at his daughter for a long moment. She had left as a spoiled princess and returned as something else, something harder and wiser. He nodded slowly. "Very well. You will go to Earth. You will have the authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire. But Yuna, understand what you are doing. If you offer them equality, we cannot take it back later. This will change everything about how the Veltari relate to other species." "Good," Yuna said firmly. "It should change. We cannot survive alone anymore, Father. The galaxy is too big, and threats like the swarm do not care about our pride or our history. We need allies, real ones, and that means treating them as they deserve." The Emperor issued the orders. Princess Yuna would travel to Earth with full diplomatic authority. She would negotiate an alliance on terms that respected human sovereignty and acknowledged their equal status. It was unprecedented in Veltari history, and many in the court objected loudly, but they all knew the alternative. The swarm was only 3 weeks away from the Empire's core worlds. Without help, without new tactics and fresh perspectives, the Veltari would fall. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Yuna prepared for her mission with a strange mixture of fear and hope. She would face Ambassador Daewon again, this time not as an arrogant princess seeking forgiveness, but as a genuine supplicant representing a desperate empire. She did not know if he would listen, if humanity would help, if anything she had learned on Earth would matter. But she knew she had to try, because the alternative was watching her entire civilization consumed by an enemy that cared nothing for ancient glory or proud traditions. The council chamber in Geneva was much smaller than the Galactic Council Station, but somehow it felt more intimidating. Princess Yuna stood in the center of the room, her royal garments traded for simple diplomatic attire, facing a semicircle of human representatives. Ambassador Daewon sat in the middle, flanked by Defense Minister Bora and Fleet Coordinator Sang Woo, a military veteran with cold, calculating eyes. Behind them, screens displayed real-time footage of the swarm's advance. More colonies had fallen. The death toll was climbing into the millions. Time was running out. "Thank you for seeing me," Yuna began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I come before you not as Princess Yuna of the Veltari Empire, but as someone who has learned, too late, the cost of arrogance and disrespect." She looked directly at Daewon. He met her gaze without emotion, his face unreadable. Months ago I insulted you and your people in front of the entire galactic community. I called you primitive, dismissed your culture as meaningless, suggested you were not worthy of recognition. I was wrong, not just in how I spoke, but in everything I believed about the natural order of the galaxy. Yuna pulled up holographic displays showing the current war. The Rathner swarm is destroying my empire. Our technology, which we believed made us superior, is failing against an enemy that evolves faster than we can adapt. We are losing because we fight with pride instead of practicality, with ancient strategies instead of innovation. Meanwhile, humanity has been engaging the swarm at your borders and winning. Sangwoo leaned forward. We are not winning. We are surviving. There is a difference. But you are learning, Yuna countered. Your forces have identified weaknesses in the swarm's hive coordination. You have developed tactics that disrupt their patterns. You are adapting at a speed my people cannot match. Because you are not bound by thousands of years of tradition telling you there is only one right way to fight. So you want our tactics, Bora said flatly. You want us to share what we have learned, what we have paid for with the lives of our people so that your empire can survive. No, Yuna said, and saw surprise flicker across their faces. I am not here to take from you. I am here to ask you to fight beside us as equals. I am here to offer a true alliance, one where both our species contribute, where both our voices matter, where both our sacrifices are honored. The room fell silent. Daewon sat motionless, his expression still giving nothing away. The silence stretched for a long, uncomfortable minute. Yuna felt the weight of it, remembered standing in the council chamber while Daewon had gathered his things in just this kind of silence. Finally, Daewon spoke. Why should we help an empire that viewed us as beneath notice? Why should we risk human lives for a civilization that would have happily watched us struggle alone? You should not, Yuna answered honestly. We do not deserve your help. But the billions of innocent people in the swarm's path deserve a chance to live. The children who will be consumed, the families who will be destroyed, they are not responsible for my arrogance or my empire's failures. If you help them, not us. Sangwoo made a dismissive sound. Pretty words from a princess who finally learned humility when her palace was threatened. Yuna flinched but did not look away. You are right. I learned nothing until it affected me personally. I spent months on Earth living among your people, and still I did not truly understand until I saw my own world in danger. That makes me a slow student and a poor diplomat. But it does not change the fact that without help, without new strategies and combined forces, the swarm will consume the Veltari Empire, and then continue spreading. Eventually it will reach Earth. Bora and Sangwoo exchanged glances. They knew she was right. The swarm would not stop at Veltari borders. It would consume everything in its path until something stopped it completely. Daewon stood and the room's attention shifted to him. He walked slowly toward Yuna until they stood face to face. She could see the lines around his eyes, the weariness of someone who had carried heavy responsibilities for too long. When you insulted us at the council, he said quietly, I walked away because staying would have meant accepting your premise that we needed your approval to have value. I walked away because some things are more important than opportunity or advancement. Dignity, self-respect. The knowledge that we are enough, regardless of what others think. Yuna nodded, afraid to speak and break whatever moment this was. Now you come here and you ask for help. And you know what? Daewon's voice hardened. I want to walk away again. I want to tell you that the Veltari Empire can burn for all we care, that you deserve exactly what is happening to you. Part of me wants to give you the same dismissal you gave us. Tears formed in Yuna's eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not beg. She had learned that much. But I cannot do that, Daewon continued, because walking away now would mean condemning billions of innocent beings to death. And that is not who we are. Humanity does not help people because they deserve it, or because they treated us well. We help because it is right. Because when we have the power to save lives, we use it. He turned to face his colleagues. We will help. Not because the Veltari asked and not because they finally learned to be polite. We will help because innocent people are dying, and we can do something about it. Bora nodded slowly. Agreed, but we have conditions. Of course, Yuna said quickly. Whatever you need. Sangwoo stood and activated a new holographic display. First, this is an alliance between equals. Combined human and Veltari fleet command, with decisions made jointly. No Veltari admiral gets to override human tactical decisions and vice versa. Agreed, Yuna said. Second, Bo-Ra added, human tactics and strategies are respected. When we tell you to do something that seems crazy or reckless, you trust us. We have been fighting the swarm with limited resources and have learned things your empire has not. Agreed. Third, Daewon said, after this crisis ends, the Veltari Empire sponsors Earth and every other species we fought beside for full council membership with equal voting rights. No more hierarchy, no more superior species and grateful inferiors equals. Yuna took a deep breath. This was the moment. Once she agreed, everything changed. The Veltari Empire's dominance would end. They would become one voice among many, no more important than the youngest species in the galaxy. Agreed, she said firmly. Then we have an alliance. Daewon extended his hand, and after a moment Yuna understood the human gesture and took it. His grip was firm, warm, real. We leave for the front lines in 3 hours. I hope your people are ready to learn some very unconventional warfare. The combined fleet assembled at the edge of Veltari space, near a nebula called the Crimson Veil. It was the largest gathering of ships from different species in galactic history. Human vessels, smaller and more maneuverable than Veltari dreadnoughts, formed the forward line. Veltari ships with their powerful shields and devastating energy weapons held the center. Ships from the Kelvari, Rothani, and a dozen other species filled supporting positions. The swarm came like a dark tide, billions of creatures moving as one vast intelligence. They filled the sensors, blotting out stars with their sheer numbers. The Veltari commanders wanted to open fire at maximum range, using their superior weapons to destroy the swarm before it got close. No, Daewon said firmly from his command ship. Let them come closer. We need them concentrated. That is suicide, a Veltari admiral protested. They will overwhelm us! Trust us, Sang-Woo replied. We have done this before. The swarm surged forward, sensing easy prey. The human ships held position, not firing, just waiting. Veltari crews watched their sensors in horror as the massive creatures came closer and closer. Some began firing against orders, panicking as the swarm approached. Hold, Daewon commanded. Hold. At what seemed like the last possible moment, the human ships exploded into action. But they did not fire their weapons. Instead, they released thousands of small drones that spread throughout the advancing swarm, each one emitting a specific electromagnetic frequency. The swarm's coordination shattered. The hive mind, which allowed billions of creatures to act as one, suddenly fractured into confused groups. Creatures collided with each other, turned in random directions, lost all sense of unified purpose. Now, Daewon shouted. All ships fire at will. The Veltari weapons opened up, and without the swarm's coordinated defenses, the energy blast tore through the creatures like paper. Human fighters darted in, targeting the larger organisms that tried to restore hive coordination. Other species' ships focused fire on the edges, preventing the swarm from regrouping. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the space around the Crimson Nebula was filled with debris from destroyed swarm creatures. The combined fleet had lost ships, including several human vessels that had deliberately rammed into swarm concentrations to buy time for others to escape. But they had won. More importantly, they had proven that the swarm could be defeated with the right tactics and cooperation. The victory at Crimson Nebula became the turning point. Over the next 3 months, the combined fleet pushed the swarm back system by system. They learned to coordinate their different strengths. Veltari shields, human tactics, Kelvari electronic warfare, Rothani heavy weapons.